Hi, good morning, good evening. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the talk today, where we'll go over, as we actually just mentioned, some topics relating to dealing with spent LFP batteries, what they are, and how we can best deal with these. So I'll be going over the importance and use of LFP batteries. And following this, Brett will then go over the economic challenges associated with these and the potential opportunity that exists therein. And then Kinnor will go over what XProEM is doing in this space to help restore the anode and cathode from these batteries to close the loop on this kind of supply chain. So we'll start off with a very basic primer, just lithium-ion batteries in general, what they are, what their different types are. So they're prominently used in a number of different types of applications, ranging from consumer electronics to different types of electric vehicles. And there's a number of key materials in battery production that are vital. There's graphite that's used for the anode, and then what's referred to as the active cathode material or black mass, which contains, it's lithium, cobalt, and nickel, but it contains a variety of chemicals. In this case, we'll talk about what those different cathode chemistries are. The cathode chemistries are important not only because they provide the batteries with their properties, but they also represent a lot of the value that's contained within a typical battery cell. So overall, when we look at the market and use of lithium-ion batteries, currently, and then looking forward, they're, like we said, prominently used in a number of different applications. The primary driver going forward for this is expected to be its adoption in the use in electric vehicles. And then there's other applications that are seen to be growing as well, notably the power storage component as well. So with different lithium-ion battery types and what are their different applications. So there's depending on the properties that are desired and the different ranges of applications, you choose a different type of battery. So I'll start off with LFP, or the lithium iron phosphate battery. This is a very safe and durable chemistry that has good thermal stability and provides a long lifespan. The disadvantages are that because of its low voltage capacity and has a lower specific energy, it's limited in some applications. Nonetheless, it's still used mainly for energy storage solutions. It's used in EVs, depending on some geographies, commercial vehicles, buses, and ferries. And then there's a number of other different chemistries. I'm not going to read every single one of them, but they range from LCO, LMO, NCA, and NMC. And again, they all offer different things. Some of them offer high specific energy. Some have a slightly lower lifespan. Some are not as stable. Some offer good safety. And then depending on what those applications are, or their properties are rather, you get to see them used in different things like consumer electronics, or preferably in EVs, or things like medical devices and power tools. Just looking at it in a different kind of sense, it covers the same kind of content, but what I'd like to draw your attention to in this case is the properties of LFP, and we'll talk about why they're useful in some applications, like I mentioned, for energy storage and in commercial vehicles of certain types. So LFP and its uses there are very vital. And we see that they're more useful in areas that need a very high energy content over a longer period of time with a larger cell size. When we look at the current cathode market, LFP contributes just on about 15 or 20% of the overall market. This is for use in all applications. And when you look at the graph on the right, which kind of covers and is tracks and forecasts what the expected battery share is supposed to look like going forward, keep in mind that the overall market does grow as well. And even then, LFP, while it looks like it loses a little bit of share in the overall market, it still grows on a tonnage level throughout that period in consideration. When we look at the specific components that I pointed out earlier, which was electric vehicles and for energy storage solutions, the current state is that NMC type batteries are the ones that are your standard or preferred chemistry for electric vehicles. And then they're repurposed in some way or form for energy storage solutions after their use in EVs. And it's not necessarily they're done in terms of their battery life, it's just the end of their useful life. NMC going forward is expected to be more of an everyday product that then is involved for medium range vehicles. NCA, which is more for a premium product that has more high voltage capability, so it'll offer long range vehicles with fast applications or acceleration, so that kind of application. LFP is more for fixed route, short distance driving and commercial vehicles like buses or trucks. And then it's kind of geography specific as well. So right now, a lot of the uses of LFP are in China. And they've shown that this does work for a bunch of applications as well. But it is a preferred solution for energy storage. And this is where the major growth in LFP is expected to be. So speaking of the energy storage solutions, like I mentioned earlier, the EV application used for LFP is mainly in China. But there is increasing use and adoption of LFP for this energy storage. So generally, they used to use used EV batteries and repurpose them, refurbish them. And then because of a shortage of NMC batteries for these storage applications, one, because they're needed and used in regular EV solutions, but also because you need to wait for them to reach their end of life before you repurpose them. So what they're finding is for energy storage solutions, it's kind of better and has been more useful to have LFP in these solutions. And so it's poised to overtake NMC as the kind of dominant stationary storage chemistry of choice. I expect it to be over 30% of the market in this space for the ESS in 2030. So what we're seeing is, I'll just summarize my points briefly. Obviously, we'll have a Q&A after where we can have a bit more of a chat. But like I discussed, the use of lithium-ion batteries in electric vehicle applications is expected to be the primary driver of growth. However, LFP use there is expected to grow and especially dominate in ESS or energy storage solution applications because of its low price on a $1 per kilowatt hour level, its long lifespan, and its increased safety performance. So this market for LFP, like I discussed earlier, while the overall share seems to be stabilized or dropping over time, the market size is still forecast to grow quite strongly in the coming years. And with that, I'll be happy to pass it on to Brett, who will discuss a little bit more about some of the challenges facing LFP.
Hello, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, just following up to Nishit's point, there are a great opportunity associated with LFP usage, and also the challenges are quite already been observed and noticed by the industry. So briefly, I would like to discuss some of them just to give you an idea of why we need to innovate in this area. So previously we talked about LFP. It is being widely used in China and also being adopted by a number of other countries due to its great balance in stability and energy density. I mean, it sounds easy, but this has been a struggle for the industry for many years. How to reach a good point between energy capacity and the safety and stability, because we have seen the cases so many times where there's a fire from the battery because it cannot sustain enough impact. And as a matter of fact, we have done study and over more than 20 autonomous fire incident. And they're not all due to great impact. Some of them are resulting from moderately, small impact. But the safety issue has been one of the hunting ghost for the EV industry, and people try to shake that off. People try to find more versatile solution, but so far there hasn't been none. And people saying, oh, you know what, let's drop the cobalt content for the NMC because the cobalt is too expensive, sure. But then when they bump up nickel, the safety has been compromised quite significantly. So that's the evolution over the last 5 years. People start off with LFP saying, but saying it's not density rich enough, so let's switch to something more density concentrated. Then they have the MC, then they go for 622, they go for N11. But at a certain point, I think both academia and industry start realizing that there's a limit how far you can push on the safety boundary, and it turns out maybe the best solution was already being presented as LFP a number of years ago. But I think that's a turnaround time people are start realizing over the last year and a half. LFP was indeed a optimal solution for a number of applications. I think Nishit alluded that earlier too. Electric vehicle, I think that goes without saying, because the pricing advantage. One thing we do notice from the industry competing with traditional combustion engine vehicle is that the price had to drop further. Adaptation for EV has been sped up lately, but it wasn't there yet. One of the drivers still need to be kicked in is the pricing need to further go down. So with the current chemistry, I think because the paradigm is already in there, given the chemistry, and the nickel price has gone up significantly lately too. So we don't see a lot of potential for the NMC or NMA type of battery to go further down to compete with the traditional vehicle. It is a direction, but I think there's a limitation how far you can work on the configuration, how far you can work on the casing lightweight to eventually achieve that. And the LFP, I think, offer the easy solution to bump up the safety, lower the cost significantly, and eventually bring the EV down to the same level of, or an even lower level to the traditional vehicles. So I think that's from the EV's perspective. Energy storage is another great application, I think, being evaluated right now. So this is funny because people used to think, okay, you know what, let me get the second-handed battery to put on the repurposing, because they were initially thinking repurposing for energy storage, it require a lower have a lower requirement for the battery condition, but it turns out not to be the case. As a matter of fact, it has its own constraints, and the condition need to be met for the repurposed battery. So a lot of times people look back and say, the NMC repurposed battery wasn't really good enough, even though it's more expensive, but it wasn't good enough for the energy storage and a great application. So if you're looking for a brand new battery to put in the grid or for energy storage, then LFP again stands out for the great pricing advantage and also its stability, because we handle a lot of energy storage projects. The area, the room isn't the constraint, but that will be the constraint for the EV. So I think that gives LFP a great runway to extend itself into energy storage and a great application. And I think that's something we yet to be seen and understood. But I think a great application for that in the coming years. And just going back to the EV side, I think LFP, as Nishit mentioned, has been predominantly used in China, and it's also a resurgence lately, as I was alluding to. Over the last 2 years, I think Tesla has positioned itself by adopting LFP as their choice battery type for new models, which has been, I think, gaining great momentum because it literally dropped the price to like a quarter, even more to that. So I think eventually EV is going to become a commodity, and people would look at them not without the flashy eyes, without the glamour, and it gonna come back to the economics, the basics, and I think pricing issue and safety issue, they had to be coming hand in hand in order for the EV to compete with the traditional vehicles. And as I was mentioning, the rising price for the key material in NMC and NMA, they're not stopping. And as a matter of fact, the volatility is causing the manufacturer a lot of issues for those metals. So though all those facts giving the LFP battery, I would say, a good second life, strictly speaking. And there's a lot of things to happen. So I single out LFP and AMCNA for a quick comparison. I mean, this is already talked about by Nishit, but I think it's good to understand that LFP, despite the criticism, it is a very comparable battery. Not in the way that it is similar to AMC, but the way how you can apply it and how you can help different application, I think that shouldn't be ignored. So for example, I mean, energy density, it is lower and the charging speed is slower, but the stability and durability, I think those are two factors I was trying to emphasize here. And especially for the durability, because I mean, we've seen the batteries capacity degraded over time, especially with the fast charging application. And LFP has a better resistance to the fast charging due to its chemistry. So I think that's something we all need to understand when we put this two on the table to compare. And the price, of course, LFP is cheaper. And last point I want to touch is recycling economics. So this is a more later stage complication where a lot of people, they don't really try to understand at first when they pick on the application. But as of yet, so LFP has actually much worse recycling economics compared to AMCNA. I'll get more into that later, but this is more the conclusion for that comparison. So when we look at it, recycling economics, what we're really looking at, it's nothing really mysterious. It's more looking at it, the different component we could extract from the used battery. And here I'm using the hydrometallurgy process and the product derived from that for direct comparison, because that has been the predominant application worldwide at this point, which is the status quo. So we could see that, of course, both contain lithium, so we will have a lithium carbonate as the common product. But after that, from the cathode perspective, we have sorry, I think I got this the other way around, but so the NMC should have the left column and LFP should have the right hand column. So we had to flip the column for the FP and NCM. But for the NCM, as the name suggested, it has nickel, it has a cobalt, it has a manganese, and for the LFP, it only has a iron phosphate. And we can see the price for those components, they're rather apart. And just for nickel and cobalt alone, they're a couple times more expensive than the iron phosphate. And to remind you, this pricing is from the very later stage. So it's already been, the iron phosphate price had already been almost 100% higher than what it used to be without this resurgence of the LFP application. So it's just not on the same level. And when you put this, of course, different battery, they will have different weight percentage for each component to come out. But once you done the math, it's still the number on the bottom line is still come out much smaller for the LFP. And the cost of using hydrometallurgy to extract these metals and the materials from these two batteries, they are different, but they're not that different. So we're looking at a losing battle for LFP, trying to recover what the operating cost from its limited product value. And as we mentioned, the struggle are already there. I think based on our discussion with our suppliers and our peers in the industry, people have been adopting hydrometallurgy for recycling LFP. There's no success. I mean, economics, just people trying to optimizing the flow rate, optimizing the like the amount of usage for the acid. I mean, sure, you help like 5% economics, but it doesn't get back you to the 20% margin even. So LFP just naturally has a less amount of value to recover from that. And it is okay when we look at it as a fresh material to apply, but for the recycling hydrometallurgically, if you cannot even recover your operating cost, then there is essentially no recycling economics to even start. So, and another, I would call tragic observation is that there is no innovation solution for specifically address for LFP because it just has less value containing that, and it just got a lot less attention coming from the industry, even from the researching effort. So people been ignoring LFP and hoping somehow this problem getting resolved by maybe someone else, but it's have been a plague for the people who are be applying that, and now they need to collect that and find a way to recycle it, and there's no good way to do it. And as I was already mentioning, repurposing was a good concept, and I think has a lot of merits in the concept, but when we look at really how to get it done in practical, there are a lot of limitations, right? The capacity, we speak, if you put 80% capacity battery back into the energy storage, a lot of times it doesn't work. There's only a small amount of application in energy storage that can go with 80% remaining capacity. A lot of them you need fresh, and the cost as well, right? Where are you gonna move that battery into a convenient location and reassemble them, and you know, eventually the cost that makes sense. And right now it doesn't. So I think that is another thing we'll be saying is that repurposing, I think work in some scenarios, but a lot of times it doesn't. So finally, I want to kind of shed some lights on where this ends, or where does this go from here? Because we're not stopping using. I mean, there are options, you know, what we can do with LFP, but the first one sounds just dumb, right? We can't really stop using LFP just because it's a unique combination of cost, and safety, and the performance. So we'll have to continue using LFP as part of the lithium battery categories. And as a matter of fact, probably more than before, as Nishit's market forecast was telling us. And the second option is lower the cost of existing recycling scheme, and that's the challenge I was mentioning, because people been trying. It's not like a lack of effort in doing so, but it's just because hydrometallurgical has a rigorous scheme in doing things, like how they had to use acid and recover the acid, and extraction and so on. The effort in lowering that cost has been there, but the result has not been so great. So which give us the third option really is developed innovative technology for reuse LFP, right? Without really breaking up and getting the individual items out, because individual items don't really carry that much value. So when we say, you know, what else we can do without breaking it, right? Without taking individual metal as it is, there ought to be other ways to address this issue, right? And trying to find the economical ways of reapplying this battery back to its original form or usable form for certain application. I think that's where the industry should be looking at, and where the future lies here. And with that, I would like to pass on to Kinnor to discuss the technical solution that we'll be proposing. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you, Brett. I think both my colleagues, Nishit and Brett, have set the right tone. You know, we're talking about the market and some of the challenges. So I'll just share my screen. So like my colleagues mentioned in the previous presentations, the market for LFP will continue to grow, and there are a lot of challenges in recycling spent LFP type batteries. So I'd like to talk about XProEM's technology for restoring anodes and cathodes from LFP batteries. So basically, if we go back to how Nishit started, that of course the battery has several components, and of course the cathode represents almost 40% of the value. But then when we go and look into individual battery types, the challenge is that we are looking at the amount of cobalt or nickel or lithium in grams per kilowatt hour in different types of batteries. And then when we come to LFP, of course, we don't have any nickel and cobalt. And one of the things with many of these current recycling technologies is that because of the presence of nickel and cobalt and the ability to recover them gives you a favorable economics of recycling. Whereas for LFP, we don't have it. So the question is, how can we recycle this economically? And if we cannot recycle this, other than repurposing, what else can we do in an innovative way so that we can create a sustainable solution for handling used LFP type batteries? So when we talk about restoration or recycling, of course, recycling has been the more predominant term because we were dealing with batteries with ternary compositions and so on. But what's going to happen eventually is LFPs, as we see, and then future LIB types such as lithium sulfur, lithium air, will also require proper handling and treatment after decommissioning. And when we talk about lithium sulfur and lithium air, along with LFPs, none of them will have cobalt and nickel. So then how can we do something for these type of batteries after their end of life? And I think one of the key questions lies from a material science point of view is that how can we restore cathodes back to their original electrical performance and skip the recycling of individual components altogether? Like, I think this is the time to start thinking in this direction. And of course, this direction means it will become a more intricate process with focus on repairing the microstructure of the spent battery component. So I just want to show you a quick example for LFP type batteries. If we look at LFP type batteries, this is how the crystal structure of a LFP type battery is. So we have the lithium ferrophosphate, so LFP. And what happens is once the battery gets, reaches its end of life, what happens is most of the lithium is depleted. And all these blue atoms, these are gone. So basically it goes towards a FePO4 structure from a LiFePO4 structure. So what happens is this lithium depleted crystal, now if we want to restore it back to its original electrical properties, we have to find a way to bring the lithium back into this structure. And this is a typical phase diagram where it shows that how the phases change from FePO4 to LiFePO4 by the addition of lithium. So the thing here is that we have to find a way so that we could mix the used battery with some lithium bearing compound, and then we will try to find a heat treatment process by which we can slowly diffuse back the lithium into the crystal. And by this way, we will be able to restore the electrical properties of the spent cathode. Now, even if we cannot achieve 100% restoration, a restoration of 90% or 95% will still be a very welcome step in the right direction. So basically, for the LFP cathode, it is important to re-establish the proper stoichiometric ratio of lithium in the used LFP cathode. And what we want to do is, for this, we have developed a solid state diffusion process, which is known as the D3R process technology, which stands for diffusion driven doping restoration. And through this process, we provide a process route to directly re-lithiate the spent LFP cathode by mixing it with a lithium-rich salt and carbon-bearing substance. And then we heat treat it to facilitate the desired diffusion of lithium back into the crystal. So what happens first is we take the cathodic black mass from spent LFP batteries, and it's first preheated in a reactor at an intermediate temperature that allows to homogenize the phases. After the homogenization, what we do is we basically try to add the lithium bearing compound and some carbon bearing substance, and we use a fine milling equipment and subsequently grind them to reach homogeneity. Then the resulting mixture is heat treated in an inert atmosphere, and the temperature is elevated to high temperature. The residence time is around 6 to 8 hours. And then what happens is the relithiation can take place efficiently. And then finally, the restored cathode material is slowly cooled under inert gas conditions, and the collection is allowed. So the relithiated LFP cathodes can have a stoichiometric ratio greater than 0.9, which is almost close to a value of 1 for a pristine LFP cathode. And I think, like I said, a 90% restoration can be a very welcome step in this direction. So in this way, without trying to recover the individual components or trying to recover lithium carbonate, we are just directly restoring the cathode, and this cathode can be reused in a battery pack, and that can solve the economic problems, because now we don't have to worry about individual component recycling. Now, this is from the cathode part, but we also have to understand that the anode also plays a very important role. And one of the things we thought is very important to understand the nature of graphite. So if we look at graphite, I mean, really there are two kinds of graphite used in anodes for lithium-ion batteries. One is natural graphite, often noted by NG or NFG, which is natural flake graphite, and then synthetic graphite. So synthetic graphite is used specifically in electric vehicle applications because of its higher purity and quality, and of course it's a little costlier. And then natural graphite is typically used for portable electronics, batteries for portable electronics, because they don't have the requirement of a very long cycle life. Now, the thing is that because of the high demands in batteries, because of electric vehicles and energy storage systems, the demand for graphite is also very high, and both natural graphite and synthetic graphite will keep on increasing. The demand for these will keep on increasing. And the problem here is that graphite is already considered as a critical raw material. So because it's a critical raw material, we also anticipate there will be some supply shortages. So then the rest of it should be taken care by synthetic graphite. And in fact, in 2020, synthetic graphite contributed to almost 60% of the total global graphite market. Now, again, the cost of synthetic graphite is a little bit an issue, because it's almost 2 to 3 times higher than natural graphite for the same quality. So we believe that restoring the anode becomes equally critical, because yes, the cathode has value, but then if graphite shortage becomes a challenge and the price of graphite, I think restoring the anode would be also a welcome step. So if we could restore both the cathode and the anode together. So under this D3R technology, we have also created a restoration process for the graphite. So in this, what we do is we take the anodic part, which is the graphite, and we wash it with distilled water, followed by a drying step. Then after drying in hot air, this graphite powder is introduced into a reactor and subjected to controlled thermal treatment. The thermal treatment activates a regraphitization process under a continuous flow of inert gas. And then the graphite powder product is slowly cooled after the completion of the heat treatment. And by this way, with this regraphitization process, we are also able to recover the anode. So the thing is that we wanted to create a consolidated flow sheet so that we could co-restore both the cathode and the anode inside our D3R technology. So basically, after having a very good physical separation through which we can basically separate the cathodic black mass and the graphite, we go through a couple of phases. So for the graphite, we go through washing and drying. And then for the black mass, the cathodic black mass, we go through preheating, then mixing, And where we are mixing, we are basically bringing in the lithium bearing compound, could be a salt. And then of course, going through some doping. And finally, both the graphite and the doped black mass is brought into the thermal treatment. And then after cooling, we can get the restored anode as well as the restored cathode. So in this way, we are able to co-restore both the electrodes. And we believe that this is going to be a game-changing technology for restoration. And through this idea, we are also coming up with ideas for other future types of lithium-ion batteries. So to conclude, of course, the current use of LFP batteries and the anticipated growth and the increased adoption in numerous applications, the importance of effectively recovering valuable cathode and anode material cannot be understated. And cathode and anode restoration via XProEM's D3R process technology allows for a cost-effective alternative to existing solutions that are not viable for LFP battery types. And finally, before wrapping up, I wanted to mention again, like we said, that there will be future LIB types where we will have lithium air and lithium sulfur. And all these, maybe we have to think on the restoration side instead of recycling. So we are actually developing a pipeline of projects, and we really want to be the leaders in restoration technology for all these future LIB types. And that's why we have a very busy agenda for the next 9 to 10 years to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kinnor. Thank you. Thank you for all the presentations and sharing all the details and information with us. Very useful for anybody who is looking to get into the recycling space or understand more about the chemistries and the dynamics involved. Thank you so much. So we still have a good 20 minutes for the Q&A session. And I will take the questions that have come in the Q&A box first. So there is one question from Mr. Menon, and he's asking, won't the reagent or chemical having more affinity towards the metal to be extracted make the recovery economical?
Well, I mean, if you look at the process, I mean, the chemistries are very, very complicated, right? So it's not going to be just one simple reagent which can just capture one metal away. So these are all like complicated chemistries. So people have been struggling to develop, simple solutions, and that's why hydrometallurgy became very popular. So I think the challenge is with hydrometallurgy, the things are not economical because you have to use a lot of acids and bases and organic solvents. Then you have wastewater generated. So all these add to the cost. So even if the reagent may be easy to use, all the supplementary things around it will make the process very costly.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to add to that too. So affinity or attachment is just one stop in recycling or recovering. And you had to separate them properly too, right? And a lot of times affinity is not an issue, but a selective affinity is. So how are you going to find a compound that is specifically attached or bind with one metal, which not to others, and do that in multiple metal scenario, and there's no interaction, and they can be separated, and they can be recovered later on with a reverse process to attach that compound and recycle that compound for later stage use, because you don't want to create the recycling environmental problem by using a reagent we're not recycling that. So I think it's a good idea to looking for specific reagent, but I think that just address one of the many aspects of recycling. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Brett. So a couple of more questions about the D3R process itself. So one question is this theoretically, is this a theory or has it been proven already? And what is the rate of success in cathode recovery?
Yeah, so we have done all the groundwork, for it, the conceptual work and the laboratory work, right? So again, now we are going to look for, the pilot and demonstration, right? But the thing with this is, because it is based on heat treatment, I mean, the chances of success is very high, because it's just a fundamental transformation of the microstructure at a desired thermal treatment. So I think the chances of success is very high. It is more about, what type of equipments you use and tweaking the process conditions.
Okay, so there is a further questions from Bhairavi, and she's asking, will you be providing this as a service in the future, or do you wish to buy spent batteries and process them yourself? It's more about your business model.
Yeah. So I mean, see, at this stage, we are having a very flexible business model. I mean, definitely we can license our technology to different players, but at the same time, we are also interested to operate our own unit, because of course, this is something which will be very interesting to see. How can we feed back the restored electrodes back to the market, right? So I think we have a very flexible business model. And I also believe, as the LFP market share keeps growing, right, I think maybe the licensing will also become equally important, because we cannot do everything ourselves, right?
Right. And another question on, has the electrochemical performance of the restored anode and cathode been studied?
Yes, so we are studying that exactly, that we have done in our lab work. Is we have taken these things and we have studied the electrical properties, and we are also going another step, is we are actually trying to put them back into a battery pack and see what is the electrical signature of those batteries, right? So definitely, I mean, that's the most important part.
Right. And can you share any timelines regarding the pilot and testing of these technologies?
Yeah, so I mean, look, of course, if there was no COVID, we should have been done. But because of COVID, things got a little delayed last year. But we are still hoping, and we are very optimistic for 2022. I think that's the time we can really launch this and push forward. And by that time, we also think, as we hear the announcements that people are moving towards LFP, I think there is a very good synchrony between the transition to LFP and then, of course, our technology, restoration technology coming in.
Okay. Another question from Ankit. He's asking, will the recycling process be applicable for other chemistries as well? And can a mixed chemistry of batteries be treated together?
So, I mean, mixed chemistry, I think my recommendation will be, it's always better not to mix chemistries, because then your recycling or restoration efficiency will go down. So it's better when you are doing the spent battery collection to segregate it by chemistry, right? And then, of course, go through very good physical separation to have very high quality black mass, right? So yeah, this restoration technology is LFP specific, but we believe that this whole idea of alternating or recovering the microstructure and relithiating the crystal, I think this concept can be extended to other LIB types, which is not NMC or Turner.
Okay. Then there are a couple of questions from Mr. Jayant, and he's asking, is there any way it can be recycled without water? And how much wastewater is generating in recycling 100 units of 18500 cell?
Yeah, so I think if we go back to the last webinar we did, we talked about our other S3M process, where we want to do a zero waste and water-free type of process. So yeah, so I think if you are using hydrometallurgy, there is a lot of wastewater generated, and you cannot help it. There will be, but that's our whole game here. We are trying to disrupt that by developing technologies like a solid state technology we developed for ternary and NMC batteries. But then we now look at the market and we see that everything's moving towards LFP. So that's why we are also focusing heavily on the restoration techniques, which is again water-free. There is no water used in this flow sheet at all.
Okay. And I think then we move to our last question from the same gentleman, and he's asking if you can throw some light on lithium titanate and development of lithium pyrophosphate.
I think I have a particular insight on lithium titanate, because I have a friend who actually been working on this as his postdoc thesis. So it is up and coming, and how far well, and how soon will it come? I think that's the debate. His professor, I think one of the pretty famous electrochemistry professor, was saying it could be another 10 years. And this guy was more optimistic, saying it could be in 5 years. But that just saying it start being commercialized. So it is not a near-term solution to what we're seeing. And the marginal benefit compared to what we're having right now is not very significant. It is better in a certain way, but I think the industry is moving into more different paradigm in terms of the battery with solid state, and also the more lithium sulfur, lithium air direction. And if we talk about 10 years down the road, I think those will be taking over rather than some traditional solution like, there are people working on lithium vanadium, titanium. I think those are maybe very useful in specific scenarios, applications, but they wouldn't be as dominant at what is LFP right now or NCM right now at this moment.
Okay. Thank you, Brett. We have one more question regarding the restoration process. With LFP batteries already having lower battery densities and restoration process being 90% effective, wouldn't this make the battery unlikely to be used in an electric vehicle again?
Okay, so I mean, I use the term 90% is just as an indicative number. You can easily go up to 95, 96% of restoration by tweaking the process, right? But what I'm trying to say is, if you have an LFP battery and you want to recycle the individual components, it's not going to be economical. At least with the restoration technology, you can come back close to 100% of its original electrical properties. So I think that's what the message was. I think the 90% is more like an indicative number.
Yeah, but it's true that 90% is not a EV grade. So if the job is 90% done, no, you can't put it in. You gotta find some other home for this restored material.
Yeah.
And by no means we're saying this is easy, right? If it's easy, people already be figuring this out. Yeah. So restoration has its own challenges. It's not slam dunk. How do we get the purity up? How do we make sure the electrochemistry property are to spec, right? How to make sure that the configuration are the way that, similar to the pristine material. I think those are what restoration facing, how it's facing own challenges, bear its own cross. But we're just saying this is an alternative to what had been done and what had been kind of at nowhere to turn. And if this offers a comparable result, specifically a better result for LFP, I think that gives us other options how we deal with this material.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. One question is around the regulation for recycling. I don't know, Kinnor, how much you already know about the Indian setup, about the policy or regulatory framework, but the question is, for recycling, the State Pollution Control Board permission has to be taken. So do you have any insights on how to go about the bureaucracy if you want to set up a recycling facility?
Yeah, so I mean, I was under the impression that these recycling guidelines should come out sometime this year, right? Mm-hmm. But I am not aware that anything has come out. I do see a lot of announcements on the Gazette for different states talking about like cell production and PLI schemes. But in terms of the regulation, I haven't seen anything concrete come out. But I think at this moment in India, it's taken under the e-waste umbrella. But I think very soon there will be something coming out. And in fact, I have had some conversations with some members who are part of a board who are going to release these regulations. Okay. And I think, yeah, but so at this point, it's still not clear. And yeah, but definitely there, I mean, anywhere you go, you have to look at these permissions and permitting. And I think that has to be dealt with. There is no escaping that.
Right. And from what we understand, there was a draft that was released some time ago. and stakeholder comments were invited, and the board is still working on finalizing the policy with respect to everything, the whole value chain, from collection to transport to recycling, reuse. So we should be, we're hoping we'll see the guidelines maybe in another 5 to 6 months. Remains to be seen.
Yeah, and to the regulatory hurdles, we don't think restoration will be considered very different from the current recycling, because in the eye of the agents or the regulatory body, it's essentially the same thing. You're trying to make something that no longer useful and useful again. So I don't expect there will be separate set of a policy specifically addressed for the restoration. I think it will be a subcategory, what may not even be for the recycling. But the standard would for the recycling will still remain, right? For the water emission discharge, for the air pollution limitation, I think, and that's why we need to work within the recycling regime, but find out where can we improve. I think that's more relevant from the regulatory perspective than creating a new set of the rules.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions. So there are questions about why we are encouraging LFP in India. I think LFP, not just in India, in China and the US, many automakers have taken to LFP, and the reasons were documented and presented by the speakers in their sessions. So anything if you missed out, we'll be sharing the recording so you can go through that again. Okay, we'll take one last question from Babji, and it says, can recycling process reduce battery prices? Which is more dangerous in recycling, LFP or NMC? We'll just take with this last question and then we'll wrap up.
I think the current status of the recycling is no. The recycled material, whether it's a precursor or direct cathode, it is still come out more expensive than the out of mine cathode. But I think the direction is there. It's dropping. It's decreasing, and that's been come off the effort from the recycling, industry, our peers. But there is a limitation to each technology in recycling it. So that's why I was, I think, putting some emphasis on how far can we lower it within the hydrometrical regime. And the answer is, again, it's limited, right? We'll try to push down, like optimizing the circuit and reduce the use of acid here and there, right? Recycling more within the loop, but it is not a permanent solving all solution. So I think eventually you'll come out furthermore and maybe compete with the auto mine, material. But so far at this moment, not yet, right? And which is more, what's the question? More dangerous or more risky in recycling?
NMC or LFP, which is more dangerous in recycling?
I think there are two layers to it. First, we talk about if this refers to discharging and handling of the material, of the battery. I think an MC, of course, because LFP, as we mentioned, has better safety associated with that. If we talk about recycling as in metallurgically recycle it and extract all the metals, I think at this moment they're equally problematic, right? With the acid and being used and with all the subsequent environmental treatment. So that they don't really have a, if you're within the hydrometrical regime, you're essentially playing with the same amount of fire. So there's no clear winner from that perspective.
Okay. So thank you very much, all the speakers and the attendees. It was a good learning session for everybody interested in the space, and have a great rest of the evening, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.